All right, let's call this meeting open. Everyone's in a dancing mood tonight. Now we're calling this meeting open at 8:23 p.m. Adoption of the agenda, Councillor Zant. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented, seconded by Councillor Cardarelli. All those in favor? Yes, I'd like to state. I'd like to make the following amendment. I'd like to amend item 6.2, the motions member. I've had new information with regards to this member's motion. I'd like to discuss this with members of the administration to obtain further details and maybe fine tune or hone the resolution. All those in favor then? Carried. Thank you. Let's go on now to disclosures of pecuniary interests. None? Fine. Thank you. Delegations and presentations. We have the honor of having Mrs. Caroline Arcan, who's giving us a presentation tonight. Good evening, Caroline. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's not a presentation, but really an exchange. I need your name and who you represent. Yes, Caroline Arcan. I'm the director of the Prescott Russell Employment Service Center. Thank you. So, thank you very much for welcoming me here tonight. My collaborators are with me here tonight, Franz Garneau and Apollonia Louise Ellard, and I'd like to talk to you about immigration and the Prescott Russell Employment and Services Centers in its involvement with all of this, and I'd like to share with you the concerns that I have with regards to this. All this would not last more than 8 minutes. So, with regards to employment service centers, one of our jobs, of course, is to fill job openings, and you know that we are short of manpower, and immigration is very important in the manpower scheme of things, especially from an employer standpoint, and also it helps out communities. It helps out communities welcoming new cultures, in keeping with our fundamental values of being welcoming to immigrants from individuals coming from other countries here in Canada. So, what we've done is we've established a partnership with an Ottawa-based organization with the Economic Development Association for Ottawa Carleton, and their mandate is to ensure proper economic development in Eastern Ontario and to welcome Francophone immigrants. So instead of reinventing the wheel, what we did was that we purchased their services, and we're quite glad to work with an individual from that organization to offer our services. Our own center did not have the expertise, the needed expertise with regards to immigration, and we needed to add to our existing knowledge base. And what this organization that we've partnered with what it does is that it meets up with people from Montreal and elsewhere, other francophone centers, and meets with them to talk about job opportunities in our area. We even will have a bus that will be traveling in a couple of days, visiting businesses and having potential immigrants visiting immigrants, or should I say, job centers in our area. We haven't confirmed where we're going to be visiting yet, but all those Clarence Rockland businesses will be visited by potential immigrant employees. And we'll also have three individuals from our center working in a program offered by Immigration Canada to recruit Francophone immigrants in France and in Belgium to fill open positions here in Eastern Ontario. We'll participate in the National Moratorium Employment also in Montreal. We know that there are a lot of immigrants here in Montreal. What we'd like to do is to interest people to settle down here in Prescott Russell, and the Prescott Russell Employment Services Center has about 300 to 400 job openings at present available for people in the area that need to be filled overnight tomorrow. So we can't really have businesses grow as much as we would want to because we don't have the manpower to ensure proper and steady growth. Now, the difficulties that we are encountering at present, and that's where I'm at in my presentation, is the lack of housing for these immigrants. Mayor Desjardins and I spoke of this earlier on. I have no solutions to propose to Town Council with regard to this, and I'm not here to come up with ready fit or one size fits all solutions. We are headquarters also in Hawkesbury as well as in Embrun. The mayor in Hawkesbury, Mrs. Paula Astley, wants to implement a strategy that would join contractors and real estate agents to gather them all together in one great discussion group and to see how we can tackle this housing problem. This might give you, members of Town Council here in Prescott Russell, food for thought for further action in the future. I don't know how you might go about doing the same thing they do in Hawkesbury, but what I can tell you is this. We have people that are greatly interested in moving here in Clarence and Rockland. We have a multitude of examples to give us of those families, those individuals, those economical immigrants that are educated, qualified, that are ready to work here, but their challenge is that they can't come up with housing. I know that social services were giving amounts of money to contractors to build affordable housing. Mr. Cote had money that allowed him to build 4 housing units on Edwards and elsewhere. That's a way to incite contractors to go ahead with this type of endeavor. Now, if you allow me, this particular comment, affordable housing might be a very interesting solution for an immigrant arriving here in Canada. But I'm talking here about people that are highly qualified, that can fill positions as engineers, managers, accountants, even lawyers. Those people that are hyper qualified, ready to pay a very, very good price for a very nice apartment. And again, we're faced with a lack of proper housing. Well, I think also, Mrs. Arquin, given the changes and the ever-changing landscape with regard to housing right now, where we're giving homeowners a bit more time now to pay their mortgages, I think that might open even further doors that would lead to greater development or more enhanced development of your idea that you've given us here tonight. But we have to take a look at the impact that that would lead to. But definitely changes will occur. Well, we're talking about apartments, but usually immigrants do set foot on our soil with 3 or 4 children. It's difficult to come up with apartments that are 3 or 4 bedroom big, if you wish. We might be looking at semi-detached or row houses or row house type apartments that might certainly meet their needs more than 1 bedroom apartments. Let me tell you honestly that most of the people wind up in that type of housing because apartments that are available are 1 or 2 bedrooms at very most and can't accommodate their needs, certainly. So I think it would be certainly much more important to build 5 or 6 townhomes together. Well, I believe we tried this here in Rockland. It didn't work out too well, the townhome experience. Single-family dwellings work out best here in Rockland. Well, maybe they're not cognizant, maybe. The developers are not cognizant of the need for this. Well, if I might, Mr. Mayor, you see, investors don't have a guarantee that they'll have a buyer for what they build, but if we don't have any housing to offer to potential immigrants, then they won't settle here. It's a catch-22 situation, of course. You know, we put in a lot of effort to have people come here and work, especially in Prescott Russell. Mr. Lalonde, I believe that a report was released early this year stating that everywhere throughout Prescott Russell, there was a lack of approximately 1,000 or so dwellings that would meet that particular need. And I think that the United Counties, within their budgetary process, or they do have money that might encourage the building of similar housing. Well, yes and no. Well, we might have an opportunity maybe to make our mark as far as that goes. If we take a look at the data stemming from the city of Ottawa, try and rent something in Ottawa. Don't even think about it. It's exceedingly expensive, and there aren't enough housing units that are available to meet the need. I think that all municipal governments, as well as all county level governments, are trying to figure out what needs to be done, and we'll have to get together and discuss this at greater length to come up with a solution that might be accessible to everyone. I think that from a construction standpoint, I spoke to someone who stated that he wanted to purchase a house, but he couldn't have a house available prior to April 2020. So this is where the situation lies at present. And also, there's a lack of manpower to build homes. There's a lack of bricklayers. There's a lack of, construction workers, and that, of course, slows down the housing projects. I don't know at what point municipalities or the United Counties of Prescott Russell are able to offer encouragement to contractors for them to build this type of housing unit. I'm talking about townhomes or something. Once immigrants have started working, often the two immigrants will work together, and they might wish to purchase single-family dwelling. It would allow people to settle here without necessarily having a single-family dwelling to call their own, but might in coming years. Something else, Mrs. Arquin? Well, that's about all I had to say. Mrs. Arquin, if you need a town council to go down to Brussels with you, or town council members to accompany you in Brussels or France in your recruitment project, we'll be there for you. Sure. Of course, we're running short of money because we can't even go to Korea right now, even though we're invited. What can I tell you? In any event, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Now, if, for example, you decided to take the bull by the horns, as one might say, and to get all contractors and investors sitting at one table, then we'd like to be part and parcel of that dialogue that you set in motion with these people and maybe share figures with these individuals. We don't have a crystal ball in front of us, but given the initiative that has been ongoing since April the 1st with our Ottawa counterparts, we've taken steps to address the situation. Well, maybe we might, Mr. Mayor, create a committee that might look into this particular matter, whereby we might include developers. Well, we'd have to ask developers and ask them whether or not they're interested. They're in taking part in deliberations of this particular committee. Don't we have any money available with regards to economic development? No. Here in Prescott Russell, we're talking about oncoming projects in Prescott Russell. There won't be any money lying around. Well, we can certainly welcome immigrants. There are some that are here that are extremely qualified, Mr. Mayor, and they represent an advantage, a clear advantage to a given community they'll be settling in. Well, maybe someone down in your neck of the woods can offer some decent housing and maybe lower the 4.6 million deficit, decrease it that we're encountering right now. Let's go on now to item 5.1, Compliance Results, Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Yes. Well, thank you very much then. Thank you.
Whose is this?
Good.
Okay. 6.1.
Item 6.1, Notice of Motion presented by myself regarding the OGRA and ROMA combined conference. I think it's worth it. I know the Roma people are not interested, but if we continue harping on this subject, that we might hold both conferences together. What's their argument? Roma figures they're better holding their own conferences on their own. They're greeting ministers in January, and the OGRA people are greeting ministers or are open for business as of February. The OGRA, of course, stands for Ontario Good Roads, and according to me, it's a loss of money, really. Why don't you just start up a conference as soon as the other one finishes theirs? Well, there isn't enough material to deal with, really, and enough ministers to go around in one particular time of the year or season. You'd have to read your notice of motion, Mr. Mayor, by the way, because you will be sponsoring it, of course, if you absolutely insist on hearing my voice. Whereas the 2019 OGRA Conference AGM, a resolution was passed regarding the re-establishment of an annual combined conference for OGRA and Roma, and whereas, according to a letter from ROMA to OGRA dated March 22, 2019, Roma states that its board is not prepared to enter into discussions with OGRA for the purpose of combining their respective conferences at this time, and whereas, as a past attendee of the combined conferences, it makes great sense for the OGRA and Roma conferences to be returned to a combined conference effort each February for the benefit of the participating municipalities. Be it resolved that the City of Clarence and Rockland ask that ROMA reconsider the possibility of re-establishing the ROMA-OGRA combined conference. And that's the extent of my resolution. Let's go on now to question period. Do any of you have any questions of Town Council? All right. Well, let's go on now to the next item, the United Counties of Prescott Russell report. Well, we have had no meeting yet. Let's go on now to committee and staff reports. Item 9.1. Fine. Okay, Mrs. Bouchard. Whereas Council has requested the administration to prepare a report to outline the process to allow the installation of chicken coops in the urban residential zones. That report number AME-19-57-R be received as information without taking further actions in regards to this matter. There are questions here. I have a question. There seems to be a designation for urban heads and rural heads. Well, what's the difference between an urban and a rural hen? Well, are the urban hens smaller? Oh, please! Oh, don't get into this now. Are they smaller in size? The rural... I won't get into this. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. So, we'll just receive it for information purposes. All those in favor, that's fine. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. Amendment to draft plan condition, the Bourgon-Lévigny subdivision, please, Mr. Bourgon. Whereas Council, through a resolution, Mr. Mayor, adopted a series of 76 conditions in regards to the subdivision project of Bourgon and Lévigny, for part of Lot 21, Concession 10, Russell Road, Chetty, on February the 4th, 2019, and whereas on March the 27th, 2019, County Council approved the minutes of the March 13th, 2019 Public Works Committee meeting in regards to a Cheney pedestrian crossing. And whereas on July 26, 2019, County Council approved the minutes of the June 12, 2019 Public Works Committee meeting in regards to the sharing of costs of the pedestrian crossing. And whereas it was resolved that the cost of the installation of the pedestrian crossing on Russell Road be shared equally between the city, the developer, and the counties. And whereas Section 51, Sub 44 of the Planning Act, LRO 1990, Chapter P13, Municipal Council can, at its discretion, modify the conditions of approval. That the committee recommends that Municipal Council approve the following additional condition to the draft plan of subdivision submitted by LaSalle Engineering and Associates Limited for Development Bourgon and Lavigne Developments Incorporated, file number D12VVV02.
CPR are responsible to design and install a pedestrian crossing treatment on County Road 2 in Cheney. This pedestrian crossing treatment will consist of a pedestrian crossover level 2, type B, intersection two-way, as per the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 15, along with any other apparatus such as proper line painting, as per Ontario Traffic Manual, referred hereto as the works. The design, purchase, and installation costs of the works will be divided in three: owner, city, and UCPR. As such, the UCPR will require $12,000, representing the estimate share cost of the owner, which shall be paid by the owner via certified check or bank draft at the time of the signing that the subdivision agreement. The design, purchase, and installation of the works will be subject to city and UCPR budget approval. If the final cost of the design, purchase, and installation of the works are above the total estimated cost of $36,000, the owner shall pay the United Counties Prescott Russell the shared difference of the additional cost, and if the final costs are lower than the estimated share cost, the UCPR will reimburse the shared difference to the owner. Once the design, purchase, and installation costs of the works are fully completed, the UCPR shall invoice the city for the actual shared final cost.
Hey,
Well, there was no way of making this resolution any shorter than it is, really. Seconded by Councillor Zant. Great. There are many things that there's a whereas that might be one too many. Well, firstly, why this was brought is that the costs were heaped entirely onto the contractor's shoulders. And many of residents, because that impacts the entrance of the park that allows people to cross. People were saying there was a lot of traffic in that area, and counties tried to hold the contractor accountable. The contractor phoned me, and I said, well, that all three parties were to be held equally accountable for this, and the contractor was certainly in favor of supplying a third of the costs involved in this. And counties also in its budget will tackle this. Could I would like to bring a modification so that we would have to read.
That council approved that the amount
$12,000 be taken from the roads reserve fund to finance the city's share of the pedestrian crossing.
Well, all right then. So we don't have to read the motion from start to finish again. Seconded by Councillor Danon. A question? Now, if this is a county road, Mr. Mayor, we often say it's a county road, but we're still called upon to pay for the maintenance of the ditches. It's a county road, but we have, ditch maintenance on county roads are not our responsibility. But when time comes about to put up lighting in that area, we pay for this. We don't pay all of it, though. There's a breakdown of costs amongst all municipalities, in between the municipality, the contractor, and the county. It's fine. This is not a new phenomenon. We're not the only people concerned with this. Quite often it would have been on a 50-50 basis, but now we're called upon just to pay only 1/3. And does this concern the work performed on Highway 17? No, because Highway 17 is a county road. Most of the costs with regards to Highway 17 are borne by the United Counties of Prescott Russell. But if we are to put up street lights, then it would be our responsibility to do so. Those lights that were put up in Wendover were put up at a 50-50 split cost basis. All those in favor then carried. Let's go on now to item 9.3. Councillor Chouanière? The council that we recommend that council approve 2019-74 to amend the zoning bylaw number 2016-10 in order to remove the holding zone H symbol and change the zoning category for the lot described as being part of lot 21, concession 10, from village residential first density holding RV1H zone to village residential first density RV1 zone. You didn't think that was all that long, was it, Mr. Levert? No, not at all. Seconded by Councillor Grimard. All those in favor? Carry. Let's go on now to item 9.4, certainly. The Committee of the Whole recommends to Council, Mr. Mayor, to amend zoning bylaw 2016-10 in order to modify the zoning bylaw for part of the property described as part of Lot 8, Concession 6, Part 1 on Reference Plan 50R-1475 and Part 3 on Reference Plan 50R-4082 from Village Residential First Density Holding RV1H Zone to Village Residential First Density RV1 Zone as recommended by the Infrastructure and Planning Department. Seconded by Councillor Zant. Questions? All those in favor? Carried. Then let's go on now to item 9.5. Credit card payments for facility booking and landfill operations. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council authorizes that credit card payments be accepted at the landfill, as well as for online facility bookings, and that credit card transaction fees be paid by the municipality. Seconded by Councillor Bouchard. Questions? Councillor Zant? I'd simply ask, well, firstly, thank you, because we've been requesting this for quite a while now. But why does it only apply to landfill and online reservations and not for certain other permits? I know it should not be applied for income, for taxes or municipal taxes or transportation costs. Well, sir, I believe that we released a report earlier on this year, and now we're able to make payments online, and residents since last week, and their residents can pay their residential taxes, water and sewer taxes, and daycare centers with a credit card, but it has to be done online. If this is done at the counter, we can't invoice the costs of that transaction. So we can now pay our municipal taxes online. Yes. Well, you see, at the beginning of the year, what we proposed was this, that the user would pay user costs. Now we're adopting a new approach. And the major difference is that the supplier, the service supplier, the one that offers the payment platform to the consumer, takes a different approach because we're dealing with different suppliers and we're dealing with one payment per person. And once this is approved, it's going to be approved at the Committee of the Whole, and it's going to be implemented at the next meeting. Will there be a notification on our website advising people that payments online are now available, or can now be made? I know that some municipalities have done so already, and I just want to make sure that Clarence Creek Arena also is on board with that if people want to pay, reservation fees or ice rink rental fees or whatever. Sir? Now, with regards to the landfill site, and I attended the landfill site on a few occasions this summer, and that might be comments directed to Mr. Leonard's department. But we have to get out of the vehicle to pay. There's a vehicle that has to be weighed at the landfill site. It's one vehicle per client. One goes in, one comes out. And it's an extremely lengthy process. Of course, we need two weigh stations. Is there a way to modify this particular service that would allow people to remain in their individual cars or vehicles? All they have to do is to, whip out their credit cards and pay. What they have to do is to physically get out of the vehicles and enter into discussion with the person responsible for the landfill site. It doesn't make sense, especially on a Saturday morning where the lineup is quite sizable. And I'm just suggesting a drive-through process, where you'd have a card with just like a McDonald's, with a screen that where you'd push a button and say, well, this is what you're owed. Put in the credit card. Poops! Out goes the credit card ticket or the admission ticket. We could certainly speed up access to our landfill station. Can't we not use the same thing as what they use in the restaurants with a portable payment mechanism where you can insert the credit card? That is, I know I've heard talk of this. This is a slow process, and now that we have a credit card system, you can make use of a credit card payment mechanism where you say, well, okay, you're Mr. X, you're here with your vehicle and about a 1,000-pound load, and this is how much it's going to cost you. You put in your credit card, that's it. Fine. Let's go on now to item 9.6, 2020 budget guideline reports. Mr. Cardarelli. That the Committee of the Whole recommends.
2020 budget timetable as a provision in report number FIN as proposed in the report number FIN 2019-026, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council provide staff with direction with respect to the tax rate increase for 2020, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the budget deliberation process as described under option 1 in report number FIN 2019-026.
Secondé, M. Zant. Question?
Seconded by Councillor Zant. All right then. Fine.
So, I have no problem with the check. I do have a problem with the way, again, that it's going to kind of process through, where I believe from what I read, if I understand correctly, the tax rate would already be set, like it was in previous years, and then we would discuss if we want.
Suggested.
It's suggested. Do we still do it like last year? We would go through line by line? Because I know you have said now, well, anything under 5,000 wouldn't be discussed, or I'm confused in it, and I have a following question after that.
So we're trying to present options here. We want to have this as a smooth process for you. I understand there was some frustration last year. So we're open to suggestion. We put 2 suggestions forward. So we're happy to modify that to accommodate discussion. So last year, the departments didn't make a presentation, and we just looked at budget pressures that were presented by the department. Happy to do a line-by-line review if you feel.
I'm okay if the departments don't do presentations. They all feed through, Fred and yourself to give their issues. I have no problems with that. I think we are elected to ensure that the budget process, that we're accountable for the budget process, and that citizens who actually have a say come through us to do it, and that's normal. That's what we're there to do. I know some people here last year were very frustrated at the line-by-line issues, and it did get tedious at some points, but it is our job. I personally think it is. So perhaps if we can just keep that in mind, different things as well. But and the last thing, as far as the budget deliberations, I think is sort of an option one. When it said, there was one thing inside that I read that, well, here's a sheet, and if you have any questions, fill this out and give it back to us. Is that, can you maybe elaborate on that? Because I was kind of like, no, I think this is the stage where I tell you, but I don't have to write
Non,
it down.
au contraire, c'est plus, c'était une nouvelle idée qu'on a eue cette année.
In fact, that allows you to come up with suggestions if there are some projects that you'd like to implement in the next year. That's the reason for this. So we'll follow up in the next few weeks, and you will circulate a suggestion sheet, and if you can give us your suggestions, and we can implement what you need to be implemented. I'm sorry. It was, I thought that it was a situation where we're caught up in the middle of the situation. If you have suggestions, send it along on a piece of paper. Councillor Guillemard, well, I don't know if it's going to be a proper suggestion, but the challenge that we've been confronted with during the last budget was that, if memory serves me right, we had an increased forecast to the tune of approximately 10 or 11%. And our job was to whittle that down to a reasonable increase. What I would like is to give a directive with regards to a ceilinged increase, 2 or 3%. We have people that are extremely competent that know where to cut in individual departments. If they come up with something around a 4% proposed tax hike, we wouldn't have that hard of a job to whittle it down. But if they come up with a budgetary pressure of a potential hike of 11%, then we'd have a lot of work to do. So I think that it would be nice to be cognizant of the budgetary pressures that would lead us to a potential 11% hike, and contemplate solutions as we go along to whittle it down to 2.5 or 3%. But now we're dealing with something that really is not within our stated goal. Should we have a method whereby we would ask town administration to target a zone in between 2.4 and 3%? If they come up with a 4% proposed increase, then we might look at it and do work that needs to be done. Now, if we're contemplating an 11% increase and we want to have a 4% increase, then what do you propose that we cut down? Well, tonight, what we're dealing with is a draft. It's a preliminary presentation. It's a necessary increase if we were to keep the same services this year of about 6.15%. The resolution has been drafted so that to take into account what you're proposing, that you would propose an increase, and that we would come up with a scenario that would be close to what you're proposing, close to the increase that you're contemplating, and implementing the changes necessary to reach that goal, that targeted goal. We've implemented that approach in previous years. At a given year, we said on or about 3%. At another, during the course of another year, we were talking about a 3.6% potential increase. It's not a new approach. Yes, but but in previous years, we didn't have a directive stemming from town council to that effect. Well, council had changed, of course. It's always the same song and dance during the election year. What can I say? Well, we'd always given an approximate directive in previous years. Mr. Zant, I believe the problem is, Mr. Mayor, in working this way, is the following. When we wish to change something that has already been cut, then we're contemplating an increase in the tax rate. Mr. Simard and I had talked about the OCRA meeting, and when I stated that we contemplated a 2% increase, and other municipalities had stated that they contemplated a 7 to 8 or 9% increase, and they asked me, why did you choose to target a 2% increase instead of soaking up the 7 to 8 or 9% that we're caught in soaking up or in paying. Last year, I remember that we discussed about closing washroom facilities in parks. I think that this year, and of course we didn't do that, but I think that this year we should sit down and take a look at the figures and determine where we should be going. I'm not in agreement with targets really because it obligates town administration to say that we need to cut right away. Well, you see, as Mr. Guillemot says, well, you know, we have a targeted goal of 2.7 or 3, and administration comes up with a 4 or 4.4% stated contemplated increase. Well, if we say 6.1 or 6.15%, we keep what we had in 2019. Show us what you have. Show us what you're recommending that we should pay for. I think that having at least a stated target, I would like to have your input in this, in fine-tuning our input. Let's not forget what the provincial government has in store for us also this year. Again, and I'd mentioned this to Mr. Desnoyers, Mr. Mayor, you're quite right. I'm not town treasurer, but you are, sir. But it would be a very good idea just to pretend that it has already been cut by 50%. If it's not the case, it's always easy to revise what needs to be done. But we know there are going to be cuts coming. We know that. All municipalities have been told that they should get ready for cuts at the municipal level. I think we should be prudent and rely on a 50-50 philosophy with regards to that. Let's just make believe that we still receive money from the federal, but I guarantee the province will cut back on funds given to us. Well, I'd like to have the concept in taking a look at cuts, and what I find quite lengthy, what was not discretionary. We're called upon to read a lot of pages, and we started skipping over those particular items. I don't know if we could squarely remove those items from our list of itemized subject for discussion. Now we're at a 6.15% increase, but even having a higher increase rate, I wouldn't mind getting involved more narrowly in what needs to be done, what needs to be discussed. There's interesting work to be performed as far as that goes. Sometimes you enter into discussions and you have a panoramic view of what needs to be done. If the gap is not all that much, we're at 3, but now we're at 6 contemplated, there's not all that much gap. I would need to have a bit more power to take a look at what needs to be cut down. And those non-discretionary items over which we have no power over could be removed from our exercise. If you'll allow me this particular comment, Mr. Mayor. In the budgetary draft, there will be an offer made by individual departments at the end of their submitted written report to you that reflects necessary changes. Councillor Chouanière? Well, we would have then an established list of priorities, and if you were called upon to cut certain things, that we need to determine what these things need to be cut. What are these things that need to be cut? Or what things need to be added? So that we don't have to go through all of an exhaustive list. There are things from the very start where you would say, well, we had no choice but to cut this. We cut this and that, and we added that there. Instead of heaping the onus upon us and saying, well, no, we'd like the reverse to be done as opposed to what you've done. But let's just set aside those small amounts that really ought not to be considered by council. But those priorities, Ms. Chouanière, that the individual departments have are not ours. Well, we would know what they consider as priority, and we take a look at those priorities, and we might figure that these are not priorities in our view, and we determine what needs to be done after interaction with them in keeping with a shared list of priorities. You know, if individual departments needed to cut services offered to the population at large right now, well, I'm in agreement with the method that Mr. Grimard proposes, but we'd have to be on the same page. Let's say if a service offered was at 6 and now it ought to be whittled down to 3%. But that it be outlined clearly and not itemized in a non-discretionary fashion. If we want to make amendments, we're totally free to do so. If Mr. Bouchard in his ward has something that the residents really want to implement, then we can do so. We can we can withdraw one set of plans and put in another set of plans that might cater to their needs. All right, please. One more asphalt? No rain, just asphalt. No rain, right? No rain, just cement, just asphalt. Fine? I can propose the following, Mr. Mayor. I could propose a figure, and we can discuss this, or the onus would be upon Mr. Bouchard. Shall we not attend the meeting to decide what we want, or do we decide tonight, or what? Why don't we just propose an increase of about 2.7%? Well, Town Council will be talking about the budget. The suggestion of Mr. Grimard of targeting 2.7 to 4% range of increases, a range of tax increases might. At least we have a starting point. If things change, things will change. But we'll enter into discussions with regards to this. Well, we have to consider the individual citizens' capacity to pay. Let's not forget that counties will also be slapping a tax on all of this also. Yeah. Any other questions, folks? Fine. All those in favor then? Well, what are we voting on, Mr. Mayor? What are we voting on, Mr. Mayor? If you wish, you can modify the second paragraph that states that we, with respect to tax increases, and change this wording with a percentage from 2.7 to 3%, and to modify this resolution to reflect the 2.7 to 3%. Again, we're talking about a 6% increase, and that's about as high as I would like discussions to start off by, and go down to about 3% or 2.5%. Last year, of course, we faced a humongous cut that we needed to implement. We're at 6 potentially at present. Well, because priorities are indicated outside the established list of priorities, we certainly ought to be able to whittle it down to a sizable increase. Well, we're talking about $600,000, Mrs. Joignette. I know. Whether we, decrease it or departments do, it has to be done. Yes, the only problem, Mr. Mayor, at present is that the 6.15% proposed increase deals with increases that are necessary to implement to meet inflationary expectations. For example, if we were to talk about potential 3% increases at this point in time, we might talk about reductions or decreases that are not even included in the usual procedure involved in applying a 6.15% increase. We might review discretionary or non-discretionary items, and the discretionary items might be even lower as opposed to their counterparts. So let's not forget that there are some options offered to us that are not addressed in this 6.15% that will allow us to reduce the amount. And let's not forget that we have also other alternatives that we can contemplate. You're talking about 6.15% just to keep up to date with regards to the increases inherent to individual departments. Well, taking a look at all programs that do exist at present. Well, maybe there aren't as many programs that are as important today as they were 3 years ago. Well, let's take a look at 3 to 6. By the month of October, we'll certainly know what the province's intent or intentions will be. in keeping with federal elections. Let's not forget that the province will be on holidays until the month of November. Well, what can I say? Depending on the outcome of the federal elections. So let's agree on the figure. We'll say 3. And if administration recommends 6.15, then we can play in between this 3 to 6.15% range. I would suggest that we start with a higher threshold, 4, leading on up to 6.5%. Well, from 3.7 to 3, administration is asking 6.1, as Mr. Grimard has alluded to. We might certainly look into what can be cut. So you'd put down 6 as a starting figure? That's what it means, as if we're putting the cart before the horse.
At 6.15%, that's cut or increase, whatever we want to do. Like,
well, it caused a lot of frustration.
Ben oui, c'est
you
ça.
and I were.
it caused frustration also because Mrs. Collier was not here, and her strong suit among many is budgeting, and I think it would go a lot smoother that she's here. But I think last year was an anomaly. It was a new council without the CEO. Can we agree that things didn't go as smoothly as it could have gone?
Yeah, but we don't want to start at very high and have to go down all the
We're
way
going to
to
start
3 or 4.
because the 6.15 identifies exactly what the department said that they needed to do. I understand that there may be some variations, but
The 6.1 is just to maintain what we have. They're not changing anything.
okay, but let him bring the budget that he's got at that. We
Got
can
6.5,
discuss it. We
yeah.
will discuss it.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's go
but-
from there. That's a lot less complicated. Let's go, the administration's gonna bring it to us 6.15, and from there, we can decide what we want cut.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Get to the time.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
Going to the maximum of whatever they need.
Yes. Again, in keeping with what you've stated, if we were to peg it at 6% at present, well, that's fine. But if you tell me we can peg it down, we can whittle it down to 3, we can implement some steps to decrease from 6 to 3. Now, I can't understand that from 6, given your expertise, we can go down to 3. I just want to have a visual implication in all of this. Well, at present, the budget is set at 6.15% to guarantee the maintenance of the availability of all current services offered to the population at large. Most of these are non-discretionary items. And inflation is a great proponent of this increase, really, inflation. So if you want to, if you're talking about cutting programs or other things, most of those items are non-discretionary. So can we have both of these items paired together, as Mr. Grimard has stated earlier on? You know, if we want to peg it at 6, then we can do so. Well, at 6%, we can say, well, we can, put in $600,000 for a given roadway project, and it's going to represent a percentage of tax increases, of course. But there's already money set aside for road construction. But if we want to do something additional to what has already been decided upon, say $600,000, we can do so. So if we want to build a roadway or perform work on a given roadway, then we can contemplate a 6% increase rather than 3%. But the 3% would not take into consideration every project that we need to implement, of course. Look, the only thing that I see in all of this is this. Let's say that a Department X, for example, would have 18 items that really need to be considered and need to be implemented in the budget to keep it at a 3% increase. But they would cut 8 other items to arrive at that 3% targeted figure. So from a visual standpoint, that's what yes, but we can play with those figures. And I added the following: to set down a priority in keeping with the department's wishes of what needs to be cut and remain on the budget, which could be cut and which can remain. Mrs. Collier, do you have anything else to say? No? Let's leave it at that. 6.1% will enter into discussions to reduce this. 6.15%. And then individual departments can take a look at the 6.15% increase at present and take a look at decreasing it to 3%. That's what we said earlier on. We've been all those in favor. Given with the keeping into account or keeping in mind the net potentiality of targeting a 3% increase. And everything that needs to be done to go from 6 to 3 and rank it in priority and set it, prioritize it. You know, and of course, what might be important for you might not be important for others. So if we have the list before us, we can decide. Yes, from a priority standpoint, we can ask the following question: what are our priorities? And I like a ranking feature to it. Could someone please read the resolution again, or the directive given? A directive be given to town administration to come up with suggestions to implement a 6.1% potential increase and the means to reduce this potential increase to 3% with a rating or priority system attached to it. All those in favor? Carry that. Thank you. Item 9.6 or 9.7, Laurier Street revitalization. Mr. Bouchard. Laurier Street revitalization. Are you lost in the meanderings of your computer? Yes, Mr. Mayor. Whereas Report INF 2019-025 was presented in June 2019, which updated Council on the status and next steps for the Laurier Street revitalization. And whereas a lighting study and an environmental assessment was identified in the next steps, that Council authorized that an environmental assessment be completed with a budget of $75,000 and that a lighting study be completed with a budget of $25,000 and that both studies be paid by the Laurier Street revitalization budget. Seconded by Councillor Cardarelli. Questions? Was there a study that was commissioned with regards to this? Well, not targeting Laurier Street per se. No, we commissioned a study with the design along with terraces. Well, the Chamber of Commerce had come up with a plan to this effect. So Clarence and Rockland didn't have anything to do with it. The municipality did not have anything to do with that. No. Councillor Zant, look, Mr. Mayor, we've been talking about Laurier Street revitalization for a long, long time. And my question is this: do we really need to spend that amount of money to realize that, to come to the conclusion that it's well lit because there's a proper lighting system in place? Well, there's a new program that's been implemented right now, the RED program, and if we were to resort to this commission study, we'd be project ready. I see. So if we spend all of that money and we don't obtain grants, how much have we spent to check the status of lights and whether they are working or functional? I have a problem with regards to the town administration. Can we take this money and put it somewhere where we can meet our real needs to guarantee Laurier Street revitalization? What did to do something else than what has already been done, if you wish. Yes. Well, the lighting, the lighting quality also is a question of health and safety. To have the necessary lighting capacity, for that particular downtown core area. Well, we're talking about $75,000, you know, to perform the work that needed to be performed along Laurier Street. We're talking about one evening required to take a look at the lighting, the existing lighting, and say, well, this one works, this one doesn't, and this bulb needs to be replaced, or this light needs to be replaced. I think that's a lot of money. Well, if involved in commissioning a study to do this, well, did we also mention that the light posts needed to be distanced from so much one to another? Why can't we apply this principle to Laurier Street? I would have much preferred to invest the $25,000 involved to be invested in implementation of the plan. The $25,000, well, the $25,000 needs to determine spacing and the available items that we have. Well, look, the engineers always have this expertise, and it's going to cost us $25,000. It's going to be an addition. It's going to be an addition to their design already, you see, Mr. Grimard. So they're going to take that because they can't do this by themselves. It's going to cost more to do it within the confines of the plan. It doesn't matter which engineering firm comes up with the design. It's going to involve the same amount of work. It's the if it's a CAW recommendation, I'm totally in agreement with Councillor Zant and Councillor Choinière. And we'll pay the $25,000 when the bill is presented to us, when someone comes up with their true plan. I'm sure that if a study is commissioned and if a contract is not given out by a given company, they'd prefer doing the work themselves. Well, that's fine. Let's keep that $25,000 for environmental study fees. Well, with the possibility of grants available to us, if we were to commission this study at $25,000, what's the possibility of return on investment if we were to come out the winner in the giving out of, in the receipt of grants? If we were to receive this grant, well, we received the information about the RED program, so where there are no details regarding this particular program. I'm in agreement with Councillor Grimard and Zant to go ahead with the $75,000 for the environmental assessment study, because after all, this is something that's going to be important for us. With regards to the lighting study, well, we can keep this in abeyance. Well, if it's worth it, according to you, can we revisit that issue? Yes, this can be done later on. I don't want to, you know, remove a possibility to, of obtaining further financing by not going ahead with what's prescribed. No, fine, but at least we can, you know, commission an environmental study. And if they need a lighting study, well, then we'll go with that. Councillor Zant states that he can perform that particular study in one given evening. Well, I can do this. Mr. Jean-Marc Lalonde spent a lot of time looking at the individual lights and reported to council as to which lights were functional and which lights were not. If Mr. Lalonde was able to do so, we can do so on our own. All those in favor, fine, but all we'll have to do is to remove the 25,000 stated amount. I would move it, so let's just remove those passages referring to lighting. I believe also that we're saying that both studies be paid from the existing budget with regards to the Laurier Revitalization Project. Well, we've already set aside $290,000 for it, so I thought you would have made use of some amount in that, and you were only left with $100,000, and that was covered. Did I read this correctly? At present, we have $197,000 with, which is CSW-related expenditures. If we were to commission a lighting study and environmental study, then we'd be left with $100,000. Fine. All those in agreement? Great then. Let's go on now to item 9.8, Mr. Simard, agreement to support private transit services.
Tandis que le Conseil
Yes,
municipal a mandaté les
whereas
services
Municipal
communautaires de
Council
collaborer à la
has
transition
mandated
vers la
that
petite
community
qui
services to collaborate in the transition to privatization of the public transit service,
soit résolu que le
be it
comité
resolved that the
recommande
Committee of the
au Conseil
Whole
d'autoriser les
hereby
directeurs
recommends to
services
Council that the Director of Community Services be authorized to sign the agreement with the public transit provider or providers to allow the use of the bus shelters and parking lots as recommended. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Any questions? Who's going to maintain them? Who's going to clean them up? Each and everyone that has a shelter in his or her given ward is responsible. Oh, thank you. Well, that's news to me. Now, we'd have to establish a stated rule with regards to this. It's a detail to a certain extent, but you know, we'll have to be responsible for the maintenance of the bus shelters. If someone, for example, breaks the bus shelter window, then we'd be held responsible to repair it. But we're insured for this, are we not, for any damages? Yes. Well, you see, those bus shelters are already on our property. So let's not forget that we won't have any parking lot facilities. Those at the church or the Jean-Marc Lalonde won't have as much space set aside for the bus shelters and so on and so forth. It's going to be covered by the town insurance anyways, town insurance policy. Any other questions? All those in favor? Carried then. Let's go on now to item 9.9. Councillor Simard, report PRO 2019-22 be received for information purposes. Seconded by Councillor Cardorelli. Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you then. Item 9.10, Mr. Lalonde. Yes, Mr. Mayor, that the Committee of the Whole receive report PRO 2019-020 as information. Yes, seconded by Councillor Zant. I'll leave that to Mr. Lalonde. Oh, well, apparently I'm the one that's going first. All right. So
thanks for the report. There's a few. Pardon?
Just to start with a good thing.
Exactly. I'm a nice guy. I wonder, there's a couple of things that I think they're missing pieces in the report. Namely, Nation was not in the report at all. You did put pretty much anybody that was around us, which is fine. But Nation, I think, resembles more of our fire department than any of the other ones, from my understanding of how they function. And they do have more part-time, I keep calling them part-time, volunteer firefighters, I am sorry. There's a couple of things here, number-wise. In the report it states that according to the mandatory courses that they need to take, a roundup of about 77 to 80 hours a year per firefighter is required to do the basic mandatory training. And your report seems to indicate to us that we're under training our firefighters with having one less hour per, well, 2 per month per firefighter. Now, the problem that the other missing information in the report is the actual cost of not only our fire department, but the others. I'm excluding Ottawa because it's a different beast. But because I looked at the budgets from the other cities as well, including ours, and it seems to me that they can do prevention, they can do training a hell of a lot cheaper than we can. And some, like Nation, have, like I said, 20 more firefighters than we do for volunteer, and their training budget is almost half as ours. So if everybody's on the same level playing field and everybody has to have those courses, there's something missing here, because we can't have 30% less training hours, as the report seems to indicate, and have way more cost at the end of the year. And I'm strictly discussing volunteer firefighters. I'm excluding the full-time guys on this one. So it's just, to me, there's missing pieces, which makes it hard to understand the report. So if you want to comment on a few things, I can.
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Mayor, to address the councilor's questions, I did receive information back from the nation. It was too late for when I had my report submitted, so it was not included in the report. They're training twice a month, typically for 2 hours a night, and they have a 60% attendance, very similar to ours. They try and get their firefighters in for some additional training when they can. He's estimating about 20 hours a year, so their training hours would be probably very similar to what you're seeing Clarence Rockland is currently. Their chief shares an opinion that I have that it may not be sufficient for where we need to be in terms of the number of hours that we probably should be trying to push for. In terms of the cost for training, I think it's important to note that we have a wide disparity in terms of wages for firefighters across the counties. And not everyone's consistent. Not everyone is paid the same for training as for incidents, you know, in terms of an hourly wage and everything else. So there are a number of disparities there. I cannot speak to how they track their training hours, whether that's attributed into a general salaries line or whether they break that out. So I don't know if their wage costs are broken out for incidents versus training.
They are.
I know in our case, our numbers in previous years were not accurate because of the way the finance department was attributing our part-time pay. So there have been discrepancies in the past that we've been working with the finance department to be more accurate in how we track our wages. But like I say, I can only speak to what the numbers say. We did, after I prepared this report, I had my admin put together a report on where all of our firefighters are to date over the last, I think it's since the beginning of 2018, to see how many hours they put in individually in training. That was a lot of data, so I didn't crowd that into the report, but I'm happy to bring more information if council's looking for more information.
Because there's training, like I see here, there's one that pops out, like the Blue Command certification. It says required because of the master plan. Well, that's something that, you know, the master plan doesn't require anything. It's just your basic. This is what we agreed to as a general rule, but it's not actually required. So are there other municipalities around us that actually train with Blue Command, Blue Card Command? So that's one of the questions I had as a follow-up. And so it's just, to me, it seems that, and I've seen the reports, the monthly reports that you submit to council on training hours and all that, which is perfect, thank you. In some months there's no training. Other months it's like through the roof. So I'm just wondering, you know, in an effort to be more, I wouldn't say conservative, but to make sure that we are training the people we need to train the right way with the right amount of training, but also making sure that we get bang for our buck. Because if we're talking about 79, 66 personnel being trained, I don't want to see a training event with only 6 or 7 guys. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of whoever's training them. And it's also a waste of tax dollars. I want to make sure that people, because you have a 60% threshold. So to me it's hard to understand why we're paying so much for training. And every year we seem to bust that budget. The past 3 years, we've busted by 20K, and I think last year or the year before was like almost 40K. So it's concerning for me, to be quite honest.
Mr. Mayor, I guess to address some of those questions, Blue Card Command, we're the only ones in Eastern Ontario that are doing it. It has been adopted in a number of other regions. It has become very prevalent in Western Canada. It was a recommendation that was adopted by council and endorsed by council as part of the Master Fire Plan. When I note required on a lot of these items in terms of the list of courses that are noted, it's because Occupational Health and Safety Act is very broad in its application. It simply requires you to train to competence. And the question is, how do you define competence in an emergency service? How do you define that someone is competent at being an incident commander? The they can make an adequate decision about whether or not to send firefighters into a burning structure, or whether they can't. And they're being tasked with putting a volunteer firefighter potentially in harm's way into a life-threatening situation. It's very difficult to say with 5 years experience on the job, you have that. The Blue Card Command Certification Program is one of very, very few incident command training programs that's available to the fire service that has an expiry date on it, much like your first aid card. So after 3 years, you need to recertify on your Blue Card program to ensure that you stay fresh with what is going on, with what we understand is happening in fires as we learn more about that, and that you're keeping your skills sharp. There is a cost to that program. So the challenge with that is I don't want to put 80 members through a 50-hour online training program and pay them for it and then put them into a 3-day cert lab. It would destroy my training budget. So we do have to be strategic in how we try and pick which people we can put into what courses to balance who needs that training. So my officers probably need that training, but I'm not going to train my new recruits in Blue Card Command, as an example. So we do try and balance that as best we can. It's not a perfect science. We struggle a lot in getting, I have a lot of people that sign up for I'll call them the Guts and Glory courses. So we run a boat training course. I've got everyone that wants to take the boat training course and get out on the river and take the boat training course. But we run a fire officer course, we run an incident safety officer course, and sometimes we struggle to get attendance for some of those programs. So it's a give or take. We are trying to make sure that we meet our obligations under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to ensure that we're protecting not only our firefighters, but also municipal interests and ensuring that we're protecting ourselves from future liability by ensuring that we train to competence. I would argue, I would suggest, as my report suggests, that I think we should do more. I think that was recognized in the Fire Master Plan that suggests we should increase our number of training hours.
Which we have, because we're training more our guys now than we've ever had training. So we've already, even before the Fire Master Plan was adopted by Council, since your arrival, this is something that was, yet you had said to us that you wanted to do. So it's already being done even before the Fire Master Plan. It's just when I hear situations where, you've put out a request for people to asking them if there's anybody that would like to have drone training, when it's something that we never discussed as a council, which would mean additional costs to the municipality, because eventually, yeah, it's good to have drone training, but eventually you're going to want a drone, because you're not going to want to borrow the county's one every time. So when we run into situations like that, and I learned of new training being done that was not approved by council, that's where I have a little bit of a problem.
Mr. Mayor, we were afforded an opportunity through the Ontario Fire College to send someone away on a professional drone operator course that typically would cost you around $1,500. Our cost would have been $65 to send a member on that course. Given the propensity of drone stuff, I'm working with Jacobs, a company that you may be familiar with, because we recently looked at a proposal with them to put forward grant funding. They're looking at a grant proposal that council may be interested in to use drone footage to improve our emergency preparedness and our emergency management programs. As part of that, they've been working with Nokia that is prepared to offer a drone to that program. Currently, the only operator the city has works for another department, doesn't work for emergency services. And here was an opportunity that was afforded to the fire department at last minute notice for $65 to send someone to the college to undertake that drone training program. I had originally offered to go because my salary costs are generally absorbed. However, that happens to coincide with the ribbon cutting ceremony in Bourget, which obviously is important to this council as it is important to me. And therefore, I tried to find another officer that would be interested to go on that program. So no one else responded to me, and I've since withdrawn from that program at no cost to the municipality. When there are training opportunities that are afforded to this department that give us an opportunity to be progressive and to look at new and innovative ways that we provide service to our residents, absolutely, I'm going to do my best to look into those. I don't always have the opportunity to come forward to council and present those in a timely manner, so I have to make an educated professional decision as to whether or not we look at that.
It's just one last comment, Mr. Mayor. It's just that when it comes to training, whether it's policing, whether it's ambulance, whether it's firefighting, there's unlimited amounts of types of training out there. This municipality cannot afford to do everything. So we need to make sure.
Training that is, I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, somebody had a heart attack in St. Pascal. The fire department was the one that saved him.
Yeah, but it's part of their,
Training,
yeah, but it's part of their mandatory
I'll tell you,
program.
if you tell Mr. Hood how he thinks about it, he's gonna say, I really appreciated that service.
No, but it's already a mandatory
But still.
training, yeah. But
Well,
there's unlimited training you
What
can
we
do.
can do is whatever's not mandated should maybe come to council.
Yeah.
And then we decide, or, you know, as a team, but
Yeah.
if we give him a budget and he's busting it every year in training, but he compensates otherwise and brings a balanced budget at the end. I mean, it's, I know what you're saying, but it's a balance also, but I'd rather have more training than just the bare minimum, my opinion, especially in emergency services.
Talking about training, where I'm kind of surprised is that the average, what is required is only 31 hours out of 52 hours of training. That's very low, you know? So like, a lot of money is spent on training, and if the firefighters don't attend the meetings, you know, it means that they need to go at another time. So maybe an effort should be made to have the firefighters attend those training sessions. Like I look at the Alfred Plantagenet, they have to attend 52.5 of the time, over 60 hours. So they can miss less than 8 hours. And we look at at our firefighters, it's like, it's almost just half of the time.
Can I just ask something? I know when you go over your allocated budget, there's another pocket you can take money to. I mean, you balance things out at the end, right? If I understand correctly. I think every other department, if I'm not mistaken, has to come back to council to ask to make the money. Because we authorize, we take 5,000 out of here and move it to there, and we'll take 10,000 here and move it to there. So why is it that the fire department doesn't have to request to move money from one envelope to another?
But he's not touching his budget.
No, but, well, there is a training budget, and everybody would have a training budget. I'm pretty sure that if, I'll use community services, for example. If they have a training budget and they surpass that training budget, wouldn't they have to come to council to ask to take money out of a different pocket of money to pay it for, no?
Their responsibility is to balance it.
The only time is for this project.
Right, but what happens though is that if community services were to take money to figure out their budget, that money would have to come from somewhere that we might actually go, hey, why don't you use that bucket of money for this or that and the other thing?
Or
So now it's all been used because
Or
now
aren't you supposed to be using that pot of money to provide extra
Mr.
service?
Wilson?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, to address council's question, I mean, when any department tries to or needs to exceed a capital budget that's been established by council, that has to come back for approval, and you see a lot of those requesting additional money for culverts or road repairs or whatever the need is, and they're requesting to take money from this fund to pay for this project because it's over budget. There are regular occurrences in operating budgets in, I would venture to say, all departments of this city, where some line items, some GL line items are over budget, and other GL line items are under budget, and ultimately, I would expect that my boss and council, your expectation of me is to work within the overall budget that you've established for our department. So if I recognize that I have more fire calls this year and that's going to put a strain on us because my response costs are higher, that I need to try and find ways to rein other things back or bring forward to council a report saying we're going to be over budget this year. And council needs to then make a decision.
I always thought that had to be negotiated or reported.
If we were to encounter something new that council hadn't approved, so, trying to think of something new that came along, then we would come to council and say, okay, we're not going to do this, and we're now going to do that. But additional training, it's just more of the same. So, so long, if we were going to go over the bottom line, then yes, we have to and ask more money.
Okay.
But we're going to find a way to make that work, you know, because coming back means a tax adjustment. We can't do that.
But if we're doing a budget and we're busting it 2 years in a row, or I don't know how long, isn't there a problem somewhere that we're not budgeting properly?
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Mayor, certainly over the last 2 years that I've been bringing budgets forward to council, I've worked to improve those numbers to address them to actual. So we're hoping that we are more accurate in our budgeting process. Certainly, as Councilor Lalonde mentioned earlier, one of my goals in coming on board with this department was to ensure the competency and the professionalization of our service and that we were able to provide good service to our residents. That did result in more training, and in the initial year that I started, I wasn't involved in that budget process. So I have, over the last couple of years, within the confines of what we can do with our budget, tried to allocate money into training. Concurrently with that, we've seen a decrease in the number of volunteers responding to emergency calls, which means that my response budget has been under budget every year for the last couple of years. So when we recognize that I'm not getting as many volunteers showing up for emergency calls, and that there's therefore wage money there, wages allocated for volunteer firefighters that is not being paid going to emergency calls, if there's an opportunity to put additional members into some training to make them more comfortable or make them more competent in the service that they provide to our residents, I'm absolutely trying to take advantage of those opportunities and make sure that we train our staff within the overall confines of my budget.
But they have to attend those sessions. With 31 hours out of 52, that's not attending many sessions.
I would suggest, to your point, that there are a number of my staff who are already not making those numbers. But we are on a slippery slope to try and go back and hold a hammer over volunteers' heads.
Okay,
So
good. Because
the fire department budget is unique in that the chief can watch his salary line, because his salary dollars that are being spent on training. And that if it's not being spent, then he can allocate more to training hours. So other departments, because the staff are full-time, and I come in to work every day to get paid, whereas a volunteer firefighter, what if we had no fire calls during the year? Then, so that would make it appear that the training budget is being busted, whereas we're just allocating more money there.
But what happens, let's say, all the fires in December, and he has no more money to pay?
Well,
That's when they come to us.
Yeah, but that's why we have a budget.
Yeah, but you don't know how many fires you're gonna get.
I know, but it's, money should be there, just in case.
Well,
When you go by, you assume, which I said tonight, we
Yeah,
shouldn't assume that you're gonna get so many fires.
Yeah,
looking at
snow
what you got in
or
the past,
anything else.
Snow is the same thing, whatever.
But we're taking the money from there to put there.
Yeah, but that's
But we're
when,
not
if
gonna
he
run
needs
it
more
across.
money, he's gotta come back to us then. If he
But
runs
you
out.
would have enough money to use it.
No, exactly.
Yeah, but you don't know how many fires you're gonna get.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. He's using the money for training, for paying to train, because he has extra.
Mr. Wilson?
So to the councillor's point, I mean, right now, in part-time wages for emergency response, this report was printed today. I've spent $115,000 for emergency responses. We're in the 8th month of the year. My budget is $310,000. The likelihood of me spending twice what I've already spent in the last third of the year is not very high. There is a gamble with that. Certainly I do have to weigh that out and try my best to balance that out with the best educated guess that I can. We can look at statistical analysis in terms of what we normally spend, and that's what I try and work within. Last year we brought our final year back within budget, which I believe some members of council were surprised that we were able to do, because we were right on budget at the end of the year. In previous years, fire departments around the county and around Ontario historically come in over budget because they incur additional costs beyond what they do. We do our best to try and keep ourselves within budget. We try and balance those costs and make sure that we can account for those things. We're not spending every penny, so that there's a little bit of leeway there. But conversely, council doesn't want me to overtax for money that I'm not spending. So you're caught between a catch-22. You don't want me putting in inflated budget numbers, but at the same time, you don't want me to overspend. So we try our best to manage that. That's what you hire me and expect me to do in my role.
Super Shaw?
I think with what you've just said, my biggest frustration from last year's budget, it was, okay, going through it was one thing, but it was like 2 months later, after cutting all these little $500 and $20 and, oh, well, now we have a $1 million surplus. So if it was situations where you already have a very good idea from your budget that you're not going to spend the entire budget, so I would rather have that forecast of how much we're already expecting to have for next year versus saying, okay, so then since I've got money here, so then I could put some more to training because I do have more of that overall money. So I think that's part of where the discussion is, in the sense that if we do have an idea that we can get a surplus somewhere, and if that could somehow be better included, because I know you've mentioned it to me 3 times why I was frustrated, that we have no way of knowing until the end of the year ends and everything are paid and this and that. And it's true, you can go on to say, well, we're approving budget in November, but that budget of how many fires still goes to December. But you could still be safe in being able to figure out, to have a thought as to what we can expect. So I think that's maybe part of the concern where people would say, well, if the impression for you is to say, well, this is what I budgeted for, and now this is a good opportunity, because you see it as an opportunity. You say, okay, well, we haven't had as many fires here, which we budgeted for. I do have some more training that we'd like to do because we want to be a better fire department. And no one's going to argue against having a better fire department. But I think that's where the argument comes from, where people will be, well, if we can get more of a surplus to invest for next year, so we don't get in a situation where we're at 6% and trying to cut here and trying to cut there. So I think that's more the idea. And if your department was able to save us $200,000 this year, well, I would be very happy that you were able to save us $200,000 this year, with everyone still being happy with what it is. So I think that's maybe a little bit as to the feeling that I'm sensing from councillors. I don't know if I'm speaking for too many people here, but that's a little bit of the sense of what I understand when they're talking about spending, we're not spending. But if we can get a surplus in the end, then it'd be good. But it was just to the comment that you just said now about what you've spent so far and what you've got left.
Mr. Wilson?
I mean, certainly our goal is to make sure we stay within our budget, absolutely. And I hear the councillor's point loud and clear. At the end of the day, I'll give you an example. This past weekend I was on call. We received a call in Rockland. I didn't have any drivers, not a single driver available to go. So I had to respond in my vehicle to the station and drive the pump to that call. I had firefighters there, but they weren't trained on running the pump. So if I have an opportunity that presents itself to train more people to be drivers or to run that pump, it's probably better suited for our fire department and better suited for our residents if I take that opportunity. The problem is I can't put every firefighter in every class that they want to do. To Councillor Lalonde's point, it will blow my budget. So I have to try and balance that. So we're trying to hand pick a couple members every time we run a regional training center class. I'm excluding volunteers that are saying, hey, I'd love to be a volunteer for you. I'd love for you to show me how to do my job better. And I'm telling them, thanks very much, but I can't afford to put you in the class. So I'm telling my volunteers that today. I'm turning people away from classes. And then as we get down through the year and I can take a better look at where my overall budget is, if there's an opportunity to put one of those firefighters into a class that they're asking to take, that's going to provide a net benefit to our residents. I'm trying to find ways to engage our employees and keep our volunteers engaged and trained to better serve our residents. To the mayor's point, whether that's helping someone at a medical call, or whether that's responding to an emergency or a rescue or whatever the case may be. But it's a fine balance. I hear council's point. My goal is not to spend every last penny. My goal is trying to manage my budget as best I can, but at the same time provide volunteer firefighters that are capable and able to respond to the community's needs.
I think if there's a surplus, we could just create a reserve with whatever surplus there is 1 year. You put it in reserve, and then you don't have the worries about budgeting it too high.
It's already in place.
There is a reserve specifically for the training.
No, for everything.
No, but
Okay. Okay. More question? Okay. 9.11.
9.11. All those in favor, by the way? Well, we're just voting on receiving the report. That's it. We're not voting on implementing the report, Mr. Mayor. That's fine.
If you could provide enough with those other staff that you have to make this report more complete to what Andre was asking, then I would like to have that, if that's a possibility.
Sorry,
One from Nation.
So you said in regards to the nation numbers and everything, so that we have that, so that we can actually see it.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect.
And one thing I would like to know is why the firefighters don't attend as many sessions as they should. The volunteers. Like you want to invest in the people who really take their jobs seriously.
It's tough.
So just to address Councillor Chouinier's question, one of the things we do when people sign up for a regional training center class is we look at their participation and their commitment into the department. So if someone's wandered off campus and they aren't coming out to training, it's not likely that they're going to get in for one of these courses. We're going to take someone that's routinely coming out, that's responding to calls, that's showing an interest, that's committing themselves to the city, and in turn we'll commit ourselves to them and try and help make them better at what they're doing. So we do try and balance that as best we can. And certainly to your point, Councillor, I can update that information and send you a revised copy. I think as long as the clerk's okay with that, we can just put that in correspondence to them.
Mr. Simard.
9.11, Mr. Simard, please. That we receive the statistics for the stemming from the construction department. Mrs. Chouanière, are there any announcements that we're allowed to make? Well, we can make individual announcements under other items. I have a lot of announcements. I think we skipped over announcements tonight. Yes, that's right. I'm sorry, I was distracted. I believe I'd asked if anybody had any announcements during the course of my report, my opening report. Any other questions? Other items? Mrs. Chouanière, you'll be asked to speak up first. Friday in between 12 noon and 3:30, there's going to be a splash pad day in Bourget. There's going to be children activities, an information booth, also a barbecue. So everybody's invited to spend a bit of time along with family members during that day. On the Thursday, August the 22nd at 4:30, it's the official opening of the fire station in Bourget. There's going to be a barbecue as well as a guided tour after the official opening.
So it's going to be the grand opening of the new fire station Bourget, so we invite everybody to come. It starts at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Friday, August 23rd at 9 p.m. There's going to be movies Under the Stars for Shrek. The film will be projected in French in the Sacré-Cœur School Yard or property. And that's in part paid by the mayor's golf tournament. That's why the mayor hosts a golf tournament each and every September. I'm not finished. We also received grants from community services also. I also have two other announcements. Saturday, August 24th, there's Tombola held from 12 noon to 5 p.m. for all family members. It's free to attend. Prizes to be won. Public entertainment. Inflatable games, all of this will be held in the Sacré-Cœur school premises. There's going to be also a treasure hunt held, as well as music. Also, on the Saturday, there'll be a tombola held at 10 a.m. before the official opening of the tombola. It's going to be a washer tournament. You have to organize teams made up of two individuals. What's a washer tournament, Mrs. Chouanière? Well, apparently it's sort of like a bocce ball tournament. The English term for that is a washathon or a washerthon. And a tombola for our English listeners is sort of like a festivity in which all types of activities, family-related of course, are hosted. Now, before that, as of 10 o'clock for adults only on that self-same day, there's a washer toss. A washer toss, not a dryer and a washer toss, but a washer toss. Please phone 613-487-3145. And on the 21st of September at the Living Natural Park, there's going to be a Woodsman's Challenge. Youngsters from 6 and up are invited to compete in an obstacle course. And there's another obstacle course set up for youngsters from 10 to 14. And then there's a more adventurous type of race and another elite race offered. So all obstacles have been removed from individual courses. It's going to be safe and pleasant to attend, and the fact that these events are held in a natural setting, we're talking here about obstacle courses to be negotiated, if you wish, by all individuals involved. Councillor Guillemard, do you have any announcements? Nothing? Councillor Zant? Oh, costs $30 per individual. Now we're up to the 21st of September, by the way. Yes. You can. I haven't finished yet. Mr. Mayor did not ask me if I'd finished yet with my announcements or not. I thought after 15 minutes you'd finished, Mrs. Chouanière. I'm sorry. Are you finished? Have you finished now? Yes, I'm done now. Councillor Zant? I'd just like to ask when the resolution will be dealt with. This resolution to authorize funds for those victims that are victims of floods.
Next council meeting.
On a case-by-case basis, right? Because we can't just wait.
Right, but I don't think that's been communicated to people that that's even available. So I had a call from someone that said I was under the impression that I didn't have to pay for my permits to rebuild or to raise their house.
Right.
I really didn't know what to say. I think the mayor and I spoke about it and said, keep your receipts. But now, how exactly, if it's a case-by-case basis, could we have some sort of framework to explain to people how they go about accessing this? So can I leave it with you guys to think of something for next meeting, if that's okay?
But and we'll explain to you why it's out. Okay.
Well, and we need to make sure that the residents understand how it works, that's all. Next thing, water bills, essentially. Phil, you and I had talked about the importance. I think I've gotten a lot. I don't know if anybody else has a lot of complaints about the water bills last time they went up. I think it's really, really crucial to be able to explain to residents exactly how much the system costs to operate, why their bills are reflected the way they are. Because I think once they understand exactly why they're paying what some consider astronomical rates, they are less likely to complain about it. So is there a possible way that when we actually finish the budget and increase the rates, as I'm sure we will again, that it's actually really broken down to say exactly why the rates are what they are, and here's what it pays for, and here's how many people contribute to the water system, that sort of thing. I think that's important.
Let's not forget that we have one of the better systems in this area here.
It's important to be able to have a graph to say the reason why you're paying this much is because this much money is attributed to this, that, this.
Yeah, that could be done in the, remember when
just a
you present the budget on in a visually manner?
We're going to have a good opportunity in InfoCité when we produce that this fall, and it'll be before the budget process, which will help people understand how the money is being spent.
Okay. It's important to just communicate those things, especially the water bill. Thank you, that's all I have.
Mr. Bouchard? It's a question. Now, on the 17th and the 18th of August, the Soccer Fest will be hosted by the Clarence Rockland Arena. Will be held there. It's a huge event, and all youngsters that are that play soccer are invited. Even those that are not involved in soccer are invited to attend the soccer matches just to see how they play out. Basically, there's going to be a barbecue also, a barbecue event there. Mr. Cormier, I'm wondering if other youngsters have requested. Well, given that the best time to sprinkle water on your lawn is in the morning hours. Now, and if you ask the people that take care of golf courses, they'll all tell you that it's the best way to sprinkle your lawn early in the morning. Now, would there be great impact if the bylaw would be modified to state the following? That people can sprinkle water from 7 to 9 o'clock in the morning and 7 and 9 o'clock at night in 2-hour blocks, if it's possible to amend our water bylaw, and if the system would be able to maintain this demand. If not, it might not be a good idea. Well, we're not talking about we don't have an electrical monitoring mechanism. We don't know when people water their lawns. Well, we're just leaning towards water conservation. If we're limiting people with regards to 7 to 10 p.m., if we are to offer them the possibility of watering their lawns from 7 to 9 o'clock in the morning, the comments I receive from citizens is that there are a lot of retired people in Clarence and Rockland that would like to water their lawns in the early morning hours, especially during July and August, where the need to water lawns is there. So if the opportunity given to people to water their lawns 2 hours in the morning, let's say from 9 to 11 or 7 to 9, and at night from 7 to 9 p.m., that's fine. If it's a possibility, that's fine. Could be. But if you don't water your lawn, the lawn won't grow, so you won't even have to cut your lawn. Well, you see, folks want to cut their lawn. They want to be outside, socialize, or exchange with their neighbors. And Mrs. Chouanière, as far as I'm concerned, I'd restrict, watering one's lawn, period. Could you look into this and come back to us on this? Mr. Levache, should I say? Yes. Mr. Corbier, I don't know if there's a way of tackling the situation. Lacroix Road has been closed since the month of May. I know this. Now, we're, I think, planning on opening up the road sometime in October. Yes, that was discussed. Is there a way maybe to advise the residents that are compelled to detour this particular area? There aren't all that many residents concerned, but to make them aware as to when the road will be repaired, because I'm trying to answer those questions that are asked of me the best I can when I receive emails to this effect. If we could look into the situation and send them, those concerned residents, a tiny note. We're talking about 40 or so residents. It wouldn't cost us all that much to advise them as to what's going on with regards to road repairs. And Councillor Simard? No? Councillor Lalonde?
I've discussed this matter with Mr. Roy as well. When you're going to be coming up with your budget for bylaw and fines and stuff like that, could you and Mr. Roy look into what our current fine system is for property maintenance and all that kind of nice stuff? This year we approved a big increase for like false alarms for fire. So I think we need to do something along the same lines for property maintenance. Because it's always the same people every year that Mr. Roy's team has to go and knock on the door, make sure the grass is cut, make sure they pick up after themselves. And so a lot of time is being wasted. So I think there should be like a fine system for these people that, the first time you get a smaller fine, second time we're going to see your place, well, the fine is double. To get rid of these problem areas once and for all. And I know you have to review what the law in Ontario states that you can do and stuff, but I think it's something that should be reviewed this year.
Gentlemen, yes.
Just to the councillor's point, Mr. Mayor, we are looking we'll certainly look into that as well and provide some options in the budget process. We're also looking at changing our fine structure so that we can retain more of that revenue rather than having to go to L'Orignal.
Yeah.
So we are looking at the AMP program, the Administrative Monetary Penalty Program. I know Mr. was working hard at trying to figure out what that could look like to hopefully retain a little bit more of the enforcement revenue here. So we are looking for potential revenue sources as well. Not that we want to be levying fines, but unfortunately that's sometimes necessary.
Deux choses pour les travaux publics. Je te remercie d'avoir mis des enseignes.
Public Works, thank you for putting up signage along the roadway in Clarence Creek to make people aware that 50 kilometers an hour is the stated or the posted speed limit. Yes, also work done along Old Highway 17 has been very well done. Community services, by the way, we haven't had the chance to congratulate you good folks for the great work you did for the River Festival activities this year. It was great. We enjoyed great success, and it's going to be even better next year. We had some old cars showing up, and it added to the spirit of the day. Adjournment is called at 9:50 p.m. Then that's it, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.